welcome back to the Build Show Network. Steve Baczek, architect here. I am down in the basement of one of our current projects under construction, and I figured I would talk about a few of the conditions that come along with different floor framing scenarios. So, today we're going to talk about floor framing. The very first condition that we're going to talk about is what we call a clear span. So you can see here, these engineered wood joists go from one side to the other on the foundation. There's no intermediate supports. Basically, the floor joist clear spans the opening. Now, obviously, we're limited to what those joists can span, or we would have to jump to a different joist series, different joist depth to accommodate a wider and or narrower clear span here. But notice that these are engineered floor joists. They're not 2x10s, 2x12s, because we've already exceeded the maximum capacity of those solid sawn timbers and had to move into an engineered lumber scenario. And honestly, most of the houses that we do, I move to an engineered wood assembly, regardless of the span. And we could talk about that a little bit more in the studio. But here we have, these are Roseburg engineered floor joists. They're the RFPI 90 series, if you're concerned about exactly what we're using. They're an 11 7/8 inch deep joist. They have a 2x4 laminated bottom cord and top cord. So it's all engineered lumber components inside the larger engineered floor joist. And again, clear span here, but as we move over here, you'll notice we had to introduce a beam for structural reasons, but this condition here is a bottom flush condition or a flush beam. And when you do a flush beam, all that really means is that the joists come into the side of the beam so that we can tuck it up basically into that basement ceiling. Now to do that, we had to get our good friends from Simpson Strong Tie out, and we got some hangers to hang the joist. So literally that floor frame is hung off the side of that LVL beam. The LVL beam is also part of the Roseburg engineered floor system. As we move over here, you'll see the last condition. This is what we call a dropped beam. A drop beam is hence the name, that it gets dropped down below the floor system, and you can see basically the floor joists simply fly over the top of it. And that floor joist or that beam is in direct alignment with a future wall that'll get framed down in the basement. So while it looks like, wow, you're gonna have this wall in the middle of the basement, it's actually gonna become a partition wall between the media room and a storage room there alongside it. Let's go back to the studio. We'll break out the floor framing plan and we'll look at all of these conditions in the plans and we'll discuss them a little further. I'll see you back at the studio.
All right. Well, there you have it. Floor framing basics. No, that wasn't floor framing with the basics. Or maybe it is with the basics. How about floor framing basics with the basic? Yeah, sounds good. Anyways, big red. Drawings. Let's get after it. So, here you have it. Floor framing plan. It's a pretty good sized first floor. Understand that everything outside of here and everything outside of that line is actually exterior deck here and here, there, and then we have a little front entryway there, and then we actually have some exterior deck out on the back side there. But we were just talking about the basics of floor framing. So out here, you know, we called for 11 7/8. What are they? RFPI 90. So they basically have top and bottom cord that looks something like that, and a little notch in there. And they're engineered floor joists. I mean, this is not magic to most of us. They've been around for a while. But just a really couple quick basics on the eye joist. You can see it there. The chords, and that's the top chord. This is obviously the bottom chord. Right there. This is called the web. And typically these can go anywhere from 1.5 inches to 3.5 in width. Sometimes they do have, some have 2.5 inch models. So basically those are the three. And then the depth here, well, those typically run 9.5, 11 and 7/8, which if you can understand why these numbers came up, please inform me. Because after the 11 and 7/8, then they get into smart numbers and just basically 14, 16, 18. And I want to say there are some that offer like 20 and 24 inch for larger, more commercial applications or just bigger houses. But this realm here is pretty much where we operate. And, the 16 and 18s, those are probably special conditions. Usually these three are the three that we go after most of the time, and then we'll introduce some kind of beam line. Understand that the top chord and bottom chord, well, those can be either solid sticks, solid 2x, or LVL. LVL is, nothing more than built up like plywood with a series of 1/8 inch pieces, and then they're notched. The web is usually an OSB web or oriented strand board, and then that gets wedged in and glued in there. And then we have the floor joist. Now, the beauty of the floor joist is by having those wider members, if you look at that, it actually resembles, what we would consider or call in the commercial world an I-beam, right? And honestly, I can remember where people used to call these I-beam joists, right? Believe it or not. But the beauty of the I-beam is that the top chord is always in compression, the bottom chord is in tension, and the further these are apart, or the deeper this is, basically the stronger it becomes, the closer they are. And hence, that's why when you're looking for longer spans, you're in the 16, 18, 20, 24 inch depth that gets you out to those much longer spans. But it's also the reason why if we just did 9.5, if we took the 9.5 on a 2x10, it's probably good for about 15 feet. 2x12 is good for about 18 feet. Well, the reality is if I switch to I-joist in a 9.5, that 15 feet gets replaced by about a 20-foot span, and that 18-foot span now gets replaced by about a 24-foot span. 24 foot, 20 foot. So we get an increase of somewhere around 25%. We can add to the typical span of a 2x10 and 2x12. So, and then of course, when you jump to 14, 16, and 18, there's not really comparison in the solid stick world anymore. So anyways, those are the basics of engineered floor joists and I-beams in comparison to solid sticks. Let's take a look here and just see a couple of the different conditions. Here we have foundation wall, and these simply just span across there. So that's what's termed a simple span. And the thing about a simple span is that you basically have a support here, and you put a beam in it, and that beam wants to deflect between the two supports. And deflection is basically the measurement of, that straight level line to the deformation under a load measured. Excuse me. It's that measurement. So, but that's basically a simple span. Is how much is that beam going to deflect? And here where I outlined it, well, that's pretty simple because it's just basically sits on the mud sill, and it goes straight across the system there. And at 11 7/8, this is, really not hard work for that. As we move down the floor frame, you'll see here where at the end of the joists, I show these pair of little L's here. And also, we call out the beam here as being a flush condition. And because it's a flush condition, what that means is that the beam and the eye joist, and this is the top chord and the bottom chord of the eye joist, but the top of the top chord is flush with the top of the beam. And so what that does is that necessitates the need for a hanger. And so we have our Simpson strong tie friends, and we get their joist hangers. And that's what these little hooks are suggesting, is that all of the floor joists from here to there on that side, all in there to there, those are all hung off the side of that beam. Again, flush condition. If we come over here, you can notice that the beams actually go over the top of the wall system there. And over the top, meaning that the floor joist is actually from there to here. And this beam here is called out as being dropped. And a dropped beam situation, I'm running out of white space here. A drop beam situation is when you have, there's the top chord of the eye joist, the bottom chord of the eye joist, right? And the beam sits underneath it like that. So it's basically dropped, right? It's down below the eye joist, and then our subfloor obviously is up there. In this case, we're using 1 1/8, but it's warm board. Which is a radiant floor heating system. But that's the drop condition. But notice that we have a drop condition over there. But the one thing that we're concerned with is that you have a negative moment. So when you have this beam, remember, we talked about the deflection of a simple span. Well, the beam on this side, or the eye joist on this side of the beam, wants to deflect like that. The beam, or the floor joist on this side of the beam wants to deflect like that. But what happens at the beam, because it's being supported, is you end up getting a negative moment. Right? So the beam wants to deflect here, but here, because we're bending it over the top of the beam, we actually get a negative moment there. So what's concerning about a negative moment? Well, obviously we get all of our stuff done by the structural engineer, and he takes it, to the fine numbers of design. But basically what you're concerned about there is the bearing area, right? The shallower or the narrower this beam is, the more kind of piercing effect that beam is going to have on that negative moment. So what we called for here is, this is a 7 1/4 inch wide LVL. So that's a 4-ply. And because it's a 4-ply, we get that full 7¼ inches, which is satisfactory for that condition, given that this is only carrying a floor. There's no wall or any situation above it that would cause additional concern to that. Now, if we step over to this side here, this beam line here is actually a bearing wall up above that also carries the roof, which is in the same direction of span there. So you basically have the roof load coming into the wall. The wall takes it down and takes it on top of that floor load. So you have that wall load there that's also trying to crush that I-joist there. So we need to have some strength there. And you'll see somewhere here, I call out for squash blocks, but basically the squash block is nothing more than a 2x4 that's cut and placed on each side of the I-joist at the bearing wall. The idea there is basically those 2 blocks, one on each side of that I-joist, are kind of creating a little tunnel for the I-joist, right? So what you would be looking at is, if I looked at that in section, is I would have that I-joist like that, and that's coming over the top of a beam which is going in the other direction, and our subfloor is up here, and we have our wall up above there going in that. This would be the bottom plate of that wall, but basically what we're doing is putting in a 2x4 block there and a 2x4 block there, and it basically creates this tunnel for the I-joist. So what it does is it allows the floor joist to do its bending and such over the top of the 3-ply beam underneath here, but the load that's being introduced on top is actually being grabbed by the 2 squash blocks, right? Hence their name. They're there because they're going to take some of that squashing action, and those are on the side. So that's basically a pretty simple floor framing plan, but certainly it has pretty much all the different conditions that you can encounter in framing a floor. So anyways, there you go. Floor framing basics with Baczek.
All right. Big Red. Job complete. If you're looking for more, you can find me right here. Build Show Network. Hundreds of videos. Go check them out. I talk about everything that I love. Water management, air barriers, framing, all kinds of good stuff. Go check it out. If you're still looking for more on Build It Podcast, team up with good friends Peter Yost, Jake Bruton. We're out there on YouTube and all of the audio channels, dropping podcasts, talking building. Those guys talk a little smack. I put them in their place. I crack a few jokes. We have fun. You will have fun. Go check it out. And lastly, Steve Baczek Architect on Instagram. Yeah, give me a follow. Join in the conversation. Let's talk building daily. You can ask me questions. I will try to answer them. And but at the very least, we're going to have a good discussion. So go check it out. Until next time, I'm signing off. Long live our buildings.